Hi everybody, Giselle Grenier here from artplace.ca. In today's video lesson, I have a really super simple little project that would be great for a child's room, or even if, just for something for yourself if you want something pretty. Very few supplies needed for this, and we're going to do some color mixing. Okay, and the idea is just to take a panel. Okay, this is just a regular canvas panel. You can use masonite canvas, you can use an art journal page, whatever you want, it doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint, we're going to gesso it first, then I'm going to paint this magenta color in the middle, and I'm going to kind of go outwards. And I was inspired by a photograph of, not really a photograph, but I was watching something on space, and I was looking at the universe, and they had some beautiful shots. That's inspired me. I'm going to make it magenta, dark around the edges, and then this is some of the new stencils from DecoArt. And the inspiration for this is for my granddaughter. It's her ballet recital this Saturday, so I thought I would do something really pretty for her, and to create something like that, which will be black. This is going to be black. And the stars, I'm not sure I'm going to leave the stars black. I'm probably going to put them white. There's going to be splashes of color on here. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to use the gesso. Oops, my brush is wet. I'm going to use the DecoArt Media White Gesso. And I'm going to prime the board. And I prime my boards, even if they're primed with gesso, I like to prime them anyways. Because what I do is before using my boards, I also give them a light sanding, because depending on where you buy your canvases, people handle them. Unfortunately, people's hands are not always clean, so you don't know what's been transferred to the canvases. Same thing when you buy paper. When you buy paper at the art store, like a pad, always try to buy it wrapped in cellophane, especially if it's drawing paper, because oils from hands will just ruin a drawing. So with canvases, especially if it's for a gift, I always do a light sanding first and then prime it. If it's wrapped in cellophane, that's fine. Nothing to worry about. So just putting a very, very thin coat on this. Where is that? Right here. I'm going to take a little bit of water. This won't take any time to dry. Because it's so thin, I can use a heat gun on this as well. And if you want a lot of texture in there, so when you put your paint down, you want some of the paint to be reflected in the actual texture, just put does that make sense? If you want the paint to take on the form of the texture, just apply your gesso a little bit thicker. Make sure it cover all the nooks and crannies. I like the bristle brush for this because it's a workhorse, number 8 Bristle Bright, one of my favorite bristle brushes. It's a soft grip, so it's comfy on the hands. Okay, water, close, and now I'm going to dry it with the heat gun, except I have a hair here. There we go. All right, dry it with the heat gun. We're back in a sec. So to get started with the paints, I'm going to use DecoArt Traditions acrylics, professional acrylics, and these are thick paints. So the colors that I have are phthalo blue, permanent alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. I also have some titanium white, and I've got some extender, and that's going to help with the drying time. It's just going to make it last a little bit longer. I'm going to put just a couple of drops directly onto the canvas. And paper towel. And I'm just going to apply this on here. And this is just to help with the painting. You may not have to do this. And I don't want to use water because it'll make it too thin. I don't want to thin the paint down. I just want to have it dry a little bit slower. So I'm just going to take some white, and I'm going to start right in the middle. Okay. Just right in this area right here, not in the middle, right there. I'm going to take some alizarin crimson, and now we're going to work it there. So I'm using X strokes, and I'm working out towards the edge. And you're going to work this and basically until you run out of paint. And I want to make sure I cover up all the nooks and crannies in the brush. Now, I also wrote a blog post about, you know, if you see white speckles in your canvas, it's not you, it's the brush. One thing when you're using natural brushes, when you're working with a very textured canvas, the brush doesn't get inside all the nooks and crannies of the canvas. So that's why it's nice when you use a bristle brush to get it started. We put gesso on there, which smooth out the texture as well. So as I'm going through, and if I see some pieces, I'll just come in and I'll just put a little bit more paint. And the whole thing with this background, wet on wet. You don't let it dry. But if you let it dry, just put some extender or even just dampen the surface with a little bit of water and just work with that. And I'm going to take more of the pure crimson right to the outside edge because this area is going to be black. So this will just, you know, help prime the edges. As long as everything is rough though. Now if you want a perfectly smooth gradation, then that's fine too. No problem. I like the wispiness of brush strokes. That's just my style. Like I said, but you can do it any way you want. Let's see if I can find some parts here. Oh, I don't know if you can see that right there. There's a little bit of speckling right here. And that's where the paint didn't get into the pores. So I'm just going to put a little bit more. If you're using, let's say, the fluid acrylics, you'll probably have to do this step twice. I'm going to take a little bit more white. And you can have, this stage here, you can do this for hours. As long as it's wet on wet, you can do this for hours. A little bit darker here. And where I see some speckling, I'm just going back over. I can pick up a little bit more of the red or a little bit more of the white. Now the alizarin crimson that I'm using is not the pure alizarin crimson because the pure alizarin crimson is extremely fugitive. It'll fade very, very quickly. So DecoArt's got a substitute which is super close. And fugitive means it'll fade very quickly. So I'm just going over, turn that back around. It's raining again. Lightening up the pressure. Just wispiness. I'm going to rinse my brush very, very quickly. Now, if you have another brush that you can use, that would even be better. And actually, that's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to use a little mop brush to show you. Little mop brush, like a little goat hair brush, and you can just tickle the surface, and you can make it super smooth if that's what you want to do. And if you're an oil painter, you'll know this technique is used by Bob Ross when he does his clouds. I learned this technique from Bill Alexander, who taught Bob Ross, and hypnotizing the area. And I can still keep all my brush strokes in there. This picks up all the excess paint. It also lightly touches and pushes the paint into the surface. You just got to keep it light. Okay? Barely anything's coming off. And that has to be dry. So what I'm going to do now is kind of push this aside, and I'm going to very carefully lift that up, put those here, and now I'm going to dry this with the heat gun. Now, if you're doing it, if you're following along with me, you don't need to worry about the sides because we're going to be working the sides with a dark color. So now what I want to do is basically paint the outside edges, but with this one here, I'm not going to put the extender down. We're going to paint this basically dry. You can use another, let's see, that brush there. The brush that I had white paint in it. I don't want to use any white paint. I can use this brush here, which is going to make it, you know, it's going to be okay, but it's going to be a little bit dry to work on this. If you're working on an art journal or a paper-based, yeah, then use this. But with a canvas, you can also work with a bristle brush, and we can just dry brush the whole thing in there. It'll take a little bit longer, but that can be done as well. So that's up to you. So I'm just going to wet my brush, and I've got an equal mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue over here, then phthalo blue and alizarin crimson over here. This is going to be for our black. And with this one here, I'm going to mix that up. And if you're using the Decor Media Fluid acrylics, use ultramarine blue and burnt umber, because the burnt umber is opaque. The burnt sienna is translucent. Or semi-transparent, I should say. And this is really dark. We don't know what color this is really until we add some white to see the true underlying color. Okay, so let's get, oh, reach. And we'll pick up a little bit of white. Look at that. How's that for a black? We have a pretty neutral gray there. Cool. Mission accomplished. All right. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to work this around, keeping it nice and soft on the edges. So if we put the paint down and you do that, don't leave it like that. Feather it out. Feather it out. And I'm going to do this part here like this. Okay. Now I want to show you if you use a stencil brush or even just a bristle brush, dry. It takes a little bit more power in your hands, but it works just as well. And I want to make sure that I have all these different shapes in here. This takes a lot more work. It's a lot more work. Also have to make sure that when I put this on here, see, I can also do it this way. This would actually be nice too, because these are going to be black. Yeah, so I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to make sure that the actual outside on this part here is much smaller. Now, when you're doing this as well, you probably didn't notice here, some of the paint came up. That's because the paint was getting tacky. And I went back over and the paint lifted up. So I'm just going to work the edge here, and doing it with a flat brush. I mean, for small areas, a little bit more difficult. Using a stencil brush or a natural bristle brush, like that number 8 Bristle Bright, that would work as well. So I'm going to make this part go up a little bit more, because that's where I'm going to turn the stencil upside down, and I'm going to put the mushrooms right inside here. And I'm going to come back in here again to readjust that. Because once I put the stencil down, I'll know which edges I need to fix up. There we go. So that's actually really pretty. I want to make the area where the stars are going to be on the dark. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. All right. But because we've got the same mixture here, if I were to stencil with this mixture, it'll just get lost. That's why I'm changing up the mixture to the phthalo blue and alizarin crimson to just make the mixture a lot nicer. Now this brush here, I can't let the paint dry in this. Okay, but at the same time, I need this brush to be dry when I want to go back over to fix up the areas. So I can do two things. I could just wrap the brush, dampen it with some water, and wrap the brush into a piece of cello wrap, like the cling wrap, plastic wrap, and then let this dry. The other thing I can do is just go with a heat gun, which won't take very long, dry it, and then I can come back over with another layer if I want. But to save the brush, I am going to put that in water because I have another one that I'm going to use, a smaller one, for the actual stenciling and to finish the sides. So I'm going to hit this with the heat gun. So once it's dried, you can see the true color on it, and there's a little bit of the red showing through. I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to paint it. If you see a lot showing through, then you might want to make that a little bit more opaque. So now what I want to do is I want to splatter paint. I don't want to splatter paint on top of the stencil. I want to splatter the paint on the background, and it'll make it look like stars. So with that, you know what? Let's use another stencil brush. Or no, let's use the number 8 Bristle Bright. This is it's another one I have. It's dry, and I'm going to take you can use a toothpick or a small, and I'm going to take the brush and I'm going to work upwards, and that'll flick the paint down. No water. I'm going to brush here, take that out. I want it to be very, very fine. If you're doing this with the Decor Media Fluid acrylics, your splotches will be bigger. The closer you get, the bigger some of the spots. Focusing more on this side here. Now, I'm going to very, very quickly dry that. Now, the same brush I was using, I put it in a bit of water. And I'm just going to take a bit more of the paint. And this takes a bit of practice, so you may want to do it off first. Yeah, that's pretty good. And now I've thinned down the paint a bit, and I want to get bigger splotches. Not too many. Okay. Put that brush back in water. And if you grab a large round brush, just showing you different ways you can do this. Load it with the inky paint, and you can just tap as well this way, and you'll get some splotches that way as well. So you don't have to have special supplies to do this. You can even use an old toothbrush if you want. Okay, I'm just going to clean this up while the piece dries. And believe it or not, all that's left is to stencil this, finish the edge, and voila, it's done. So I'm going to dry these pieces now. These splotches have to be 100% dry before you can do any stenciling. I added a few more splotches. Now we're ready to go. So what we can do now is we can do our stenciling. And let's make sure. I want to make sure this is down to room temperature. You don't want to be stenciling over a hot canvas. So I'm going to bring the design right about to here, leaving a bit of a gap here in case this needs to be framed. You want to leave at least 1/4 of an inch. Like 1/4 of an inch. This is more of a 1/2 inch. I don't want to get too close though, because I do want that gap. So if it was going to be framed, I'll just move this over right about here. All right, so palette knife. Uh-oh. Palette knife. Here it is. So I'm going to mix up the phthalo blue and alizarin crimson. You can use black if you want. And the phthalo blue is a blue on the green side. Alizarin crimson is a red on the blue side. Sorry, phthalo blue is a blue on the green side. Alizarin crimson is a red on the blue side. So where you have the red and the shade of the green, you're going to get something very, very dark. If you're doing this with the fluid acrylics, you're going to use phthalo blue and quinacridone magenta. But the quinacridone magenta is a little bit weaker than the phthalo blue. So this looks really black, right? Now let's see what it looks like when you add a bit of white. You get purple. So that's how you test to see the true underlying color. But we're going to be stenciling it, so it will look black. And I don't use black as is because it's flat. It's lacking color. What we've just made here is a chromatic black. So I'm going to load my brush. Okay, but that much. Then I'm going to wipe off the excess on a paper towel. And I'm going to come in and pounce lightly. Do not dampen your brush first because the paint will just seep underneath. And this little brush I'm using is domed. It's also shedding hair. You'll have shedding regardless of the brand. Now, I can make the stars white or I can make them black. I actually want to make them white, so I'm just going to work her hands. Let's just do a quick little lift up. Oh, look at that. Careful not to move. If you're not comfortable with stenciling, you can also tape the edges down. Just make sure you use a low tack tape. And where there's small, delicate pieces, go slow. Up and down. If you go side to side when there's small little pieces, you may damage the stencil. These new DecoArt stencils on this, I'll call it a plastic film, super strong. I absolutely love how they're making their new stencils. Super, super strong. And you can, if you have smaller brushes, you can also pounce to add some shading in here if you want. I'm keeping this as a straight silhouette, so I'm not going to worry about it. And I'm going up and down because as I pounce over, some of the background is showing through the top areas, which creates a beautiful highlight. You can make it completely opaque if you want. That's totally up to you. And with these stencils here, if you can, have a Tupperware container or a big plastic container filled with water, that we can just throw your stencils in that container until you can clean them. Very carefully checking. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So area that's really dark, I'm going to make sure that that's covered up nicely. The areas close to the top part of the stencil, that I'm not going to pounce an extra layer because I like the idea of some of that red showing through. Okay, you know what I just forgot to do? The stars. I forgot to do the stars. You know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth it to muck that up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other stencil. Let me just dry this first. So I was going to use the other stencil, and I thought, well, I might as well clean this. I've never used a stencil before. I can clean it with a dry paper towel. Look at that. It's just coming off. Just be careful with the small pieces. I hate cleaning stencils. I'm not going to lie to you. I can't stand it, and I don't care, you know, what magic product is out there for that. Even using winning colors, I hate cleaning stencils. So this is actually a nice thing to be able to do, but you got to be careful with these little areas here. In worst case scenario, I wear a mask, use rubbing alcohol to clean the stencil that's that is stained. So just a little bit of water. So that works as well. Okay, so I just thought when I started just wiping it down with the paper towel, that I gotta show you guys this, how easy this is. So this is a nice change. That's a nice change. All right, so I can then turn around now and use the same. Whoops, meant that. Use the same one. I'm not going to. I'm going to use the other stencil because I like the shape of these little stars a bit better. I'm going to do it like that. So I'm going to have it where this star is actually coming out of her hand. Where's her little hand? Right there, like that. And I'll have to get another stencil brush because the other one's covered with black. Silver paint would be good for this. Silver paint. But I want to make this easy for you guys, not having to, you know, if you're watching this, it's likely you have white paint and some type of blue and some type of red and some type of brown. Now I just finished recording a whole series of color mixing videos where all I needed was a blue, a red, and a yellow, and I made burnt sienna, I mixed up burnt umber, I made a raw umber, I made up all the colors in a palette. I made up all those colors, so really you could get away with just using blue, red, and yellow, and white. Yeah, yes. Yes, yes, yes. There we go. Beauty. So now I'm just going to dry those stars. So all that's left to do now is basically just to touch up that area. Oh, and this stencil, by the way, is an Americana Decor stencil. It's not the mixed media stencil. So I'm going to just go another stencil brush. I like doing all my stenciling on a dry brush. And now I'm going to go around. And I'm not going to cover everything exactly, but I am going to alter the direction so it looks like there's kind of a misty area behind. Keep the pattern different. Now because we used this mixture initially, so when this mixture goes on, it'll even be darker. And we're also going to use this mixture to finish the sides. I'll just darken the stars a little bit. I'm going to apply this part dry. Doesn't take much. Phthalo blue and alizarin crimson are super strong pigments. Well, the alizarin crimson mixture that Decor made. So as I'm doing this part here has a slight purple tint to it. It is gorgeous. It's so pretty. Ava loves purple. So as I'm now by doing the dry brushing, I'm glazing this. Where it's going over some of the stars are turning purple. So change up the direction. Work around some negative space so you have a nice flow, nice pattern there. Keep it dreamy. This is going to be a little bit thicker because now what I'm going to do, shoot. I can't talk and paint at the same time, I swear. Okay, look at that. That's part of the problem. So I'm not going to edit this. I'm going to show you how to fix it. I am the master of my happy accidents. Baby wipe. And gently go over. There, done. Now, push that aside. And I'm going to wipe my hands. And did I just roll that other brush into white paint? Probably. I get so into, oh, when we lived on Gage downtown Hamilton. Well, not really downtown Hamilton, but off the mountain. The room that I had for the studio was massive. It was a massive room because I was mentoring young people as they were preparing and applying for art school. And when I was one student, I was teaching her to be very, very expressive, and the two of us were doing I call it like using the body as the brush, and man, we got paint everywhere. It was fun. She did get into that art school, by the way. Okay. So now, let's turn you over. And so now I'm just working some grass in front of the mushrooms. Keep that wispy. Like that. That's a bit too straight for me, so I'm just going to feather that out like this. To make it look like grass. Touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift. Make sure you get some in front of the mushrooms because it's a darker color than that chromatic black. There we go. And all that's left to do now is I'm going to pick this up, take the brush, and I'm just going to apply the paint on the side. If you're unstable with your hands, or if you're not really quite balanced, or you're a little uncomfortable holding a wet panel like this, dry it and then do this. The parts that are really, this part here is a little bit awkward. This one here. There we go. So you can do this on masonite, on regular canvas. So now I'm going to take the heat gun and I'm going to dry this again. There we are. So she's all dry. I absolutely love this. This is beautiful. Now the design of this would actually make a nice for a nice two-piece set. Is that you can use this one as well, which would be really, really pretty. So I think I may do another one using this stencil, and that way it can be, you know, to make it cohesive in the room. So you can have like a series of 3. You could have this one, then do something else in the middle, then have the other one on the side. So it's up to you, but this would work really well. Any color works for this. Any color, as long as you have a dark that kind of coordinates with this. So take whatever red you have with white to create your background, and then use that similar red to create that really, really dark part. That way when you paint that in, when the red shows through, it's going to work. Meaning, if I'm going to use alizarin crimson and phthalo blue for this really, really dark red, I'm not going to use naphthol red light for this one here because the colors are going to shift. So I can do that, but if you're learning and you want to create something super simple, to keep it simple, use the least amount of colors as you can, because then it will go together. And knowing a little bit about color mixing will also help. So you can check out my blog for the ones that I have there, and see if any of that helps. There's a free video on there as well. Alrighty, so what do you think? Think Ava will like this? I think she will. I'm going to do one for Wolfe as well. And for Wolfe, I have to find something that's more manly. If there was a Thomas the Train, that would be nice. But I can't find Thomas the Train stencils. I don't think they're made. So I'll have to do something for him, for his room. And of course, I'll be using blues and teals for Wolfe. Alrighty. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below the video. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That way you're not going to miss out on anything. Alrighty, you guys. I'm going to go and clean up and prepare for the next project. So until I see you in the next video, stay inspired.